The Young and the Restless spoilers Saturday's full episodes June 7, 2025. It was never supposed to be this way. Kyle Abbott had once believed he could navigate love, legacy, and ambition without losing his soul, but those illusions had shattered the moment he stepped into the crosshairs of Victor Newman's judgment. Now, he found himself inching closer to something he never imagined. A pact with the devil, forged in desperation, pride, and the aching hope that maybe, just maybe, he could be the man Claire Newman needed him to be. His steps toward the Newman ranch that morning were deliberate, heavy with the knowledge of what was about to unfold. In his hand was a contract, one he had authored, but never expected to be taken seriously. A contract that offered Victor Newman $5 million if Kyle ever broke Claire's heart, with a clause stating he would vanish from Genoa City for good should that promise ever be violated. To many, it was a bribe. To Kyle, it was a desperate gesture of sincerity wrapped in a calculated gamble. Victor met him at the gates with an expression unreadable and cold, the kind that suggested he had already evaluated the entire situation 10 moves ahead. "I wouldn't be celebrating just yet," Victor said coolly. "Not until you hear what I have to say about your proposal." Kyle hesitated, the contract still tucked under his arm. "I didn't expect you to actually consider it," Kyle admitted. "I thought you'd tear it up and throw me out the door." Victor's eyes narrowed, voice flat. "You'll only be surprised if you decide to break my granddaughter's heart." That was the moment everything shifted. Kyle watched in stunned silence as Victor pulled out his own version of the contract, already written, already notarized. It wasn't a rejection. It was a challenge. And Kyle, unable to back down now, signed it right then and there, his name inked beneath a promise few men in Genoa City could keep. "You won't ever have to enforce it," he said, barely above a whisper. "I'll make Claire happy." Victor gave a rare nod of approval. "Perhaps I misjudged you, Kyle. Time will tell if that's to my regret." But far from the ranch, the world continued to turn, and with it, secrets stirred in dark corners. At Crimson Lights, Audra Charles was already weaving her next web. Dressed sharply, she leaned against the bar with a subtle smirk, speaking in hushed tones to Victor about the upcoming gala hosted by Aristotle Dumas in the south of France. "I'm just saying," she murmured, "a party like that could use some spice. What's more thrilling than a beautiful woman and a man willing to do anything to prove his loyalty?" She meant herself and Kyle, of course, and she wasn't being subtle. Victor raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He knew when he was being played, and sometimes he allowed it if the game served his purposes. Not far away, Damian Kane's world was unraveling. After days of silence, he finally reached out to Holden Novak, his closest confidant in a world that no longer felt stable. The message was clear: trouble was coming. Not just corporate trouble, but personal. Damian had stumbled across something tied to Aristotle Dumas and a shadow partnership that implicated several powerful Genoa figures. Holden, ever the pragmatist, didn't want to believe it, but Damian's voice held a kind of finality that made denial impossible. "They're coming for the rest of us next," Damian warned. "And if you're not prepared, you'll fall with them." Elsewhere, Amy Lewis was preparing to change the game. After weeks of uncertainty, soul-searching, and the weight of family ties tugging her in every direction, she finally made her decision. In a private moment with Audra and Nate Hastings, she smiled, calm, confident, and determined. "I've made up my mind," she said softly. "I'm moving to Genoa City." Audra lit up immediately, wrapping her in a warm embrace, followed closely by Nate. What they didn't realize was that Amy's move wasn't just personal. It was strategic. She had information. And she intended to use it. Back at Newman Enterprises, Kyle stood quietly outside Claire's office, staring at the closed door, replaying the moment with Victor over and over again in his mind. The contract. The warning. The weight of what he had just signed. He hadn't told Claire yet. He didn't know how to explain that he had legally wagered his future on the success of their relationship, that he had essentially put a price on his own heart. And yet, a part of him believed she deserved that level of commitment, after everything she had been through, after all the scars left by those who promised loyalty and delivered pain. Claire was unlike anyone he had ever loved, and he needed her to believe in him as much as he was now willing to bet on her. But trust was fragile. And the storm clouds gathering over Genoa City were not done stirring. At society, whispers of the Dumas party spread like wildfire. Everyone who wasn't invited wanted in. Everyone who was invited wondered if they should even go. Because Aristotle Dumas had yet to show his face, and rumors of his identity were reaching a fever pitch. Some said he was a European tycoon with no ties to Genoa. Others said he was an American with a vendetta. One theory claimed he wasn't a man at all, but a collective, an entity hiding behind a name, infiltrating power structures from all sides. None of them were prepared for the truth. Because the truth, as always, was stranger and more dangerous than any fiction. Nick, now entangled deeper than he ever imagined, debated whether to tell Victor the truth about what he had learned about Aristotle. But circumstances, dangerous, chaotic, unpredictable, kept silencing him at every turn. Someone was always watching. J.T. Hellstrom, revealed as the man behind the Dumas mask, had already taken control of too many threads to allow any one person to pull at the fabric of his deception. And now, Kyle, unknowingly or not, had placed himself directly in JT's line of fire by signing a contract that made his personal life Victor's business. That contract was more than a gesture, it was a leash. Yet Kyle couldn't see it. All he saw was the hope of redemption. All he wanted was to protect Claire, to prove to her, and to the world, that he wasn't the man who broke Summer's heart, or the man who let his ambition destroy his family. He was different now. At least, he believed he was. And as Amy prepared her move, Damian whispered warnings, Audra spun her influence, and JT tightened his grip, the chessboard began to tilt. Victor Newman, who had just granted Kyle a rare sliver of trust, would soon be forced to ask himself whether that trust was earned or expertly manipulated. Because in Genoa City, deals made with devils never stay silent for long. And Kyle's signature might not just be the beginning of love. It could be the beginning of the end. Would you like the next chapter to follow Claire discovering the contract, Amy exposing JT's connection to Dumas, or Victor and Adam preparing a counterattack in France? Let me know how you'd like the chaos to evolve. The mood inside GCAC was strangely calm, the elegant buzz of the restaurant hiding the emotional undertones brewing beneath its marble floors and crystal glasses. Damian Kane sat across from Lily Winters, his fingers curled lightly around a half-empty glass of bourbon. He looked composed, but Lily, who had grown used to the many faces of ambition and deception in Genoa City, knew that something in him had changed. His voice was soft but steady as he explained the decision he had made. I'm going to meet with Holden, Damian said, eyes fixed on the table. He needs to know I'm done. That I've walked away from Dumas. Lily blinked. You quit? He gave a bitter smile. I wasn't really given a choice. But yeah. It's over. He paused before adding, I was hoping, wondering, really, if there might be a place for Holden at Winters. He's going to be blindsided by this. I just want to soften the landing a little. Lily nodded, thoughtful. I can't promise anything, but I'll look into where he might fit. If he's got the skill set, I'll find something. Her phone buzzed, and she excused herself, leaving Damian in a storm of his own making. A moment later, Holden Novak stepped in, his expression tight with suspicion. He walked straight to Damian and dropped into the seat Lily had just vacated. What the hell is going on? Damian didn't look surprised. I was just about to tell you. We're out. Dumas let us go. No warning. Holden froze. Out? You mean you got fired, and you dragged me down with you? I didn't drag you down, Damian said quietly. Holden scoffed. You didn't even tell me. You left me hanging so you could chase after a woman you barely know. That's not fair, Damian said, jaw clenched. I didn't plan this. Things happened fast. I'm trying to make things right. Right? Holden snapped. You think I care about Winter's enterprises right now? I just got blindsided, Damian. You think Lily Winters can fix this for me? What about my plans, my future? You wrecked everything. Damian leaned back, tired. Maybe this is what we both need. Maybe it's time we go our separate ways, clean. Holden looked at him long and hard, then stood without a word. As he turned, Amy Lewis and Audra Charles entered, catching only the tail end of the scene. Holden didn't even stop to acknowledge them. He brushed past, leaving the tense air behind him. Amy looked concerned. What was that about? Clean break, Damian said, not looking up. Meanwhile, Audra's phone rang with a sharp chime. She glanced at the screen, and her eyes widened. I have to take this, she muttered, stepping aside. Amy gave Damian a knowing look before following Audra out of earshot. Victor's voice was unmistakable, sharp and clipped through the phone. I need to see you. Now. Less than an hour later, Audra arrived at the Newman Ranch, cool and poised despite the chill in Victor's tone. She barely made it inside before he turned on her with that piercing gaze. What's taking so long? Victor asked. You were supposed to handle Claire. I'm working on it, Audra said carefully. These things take finesse, Victor. You can't rush trust. He folded his arms. I don't care how you do it, but something better change before I return from France. Understood? Audra's eyes narrowed slightly, calculating. It might help if Kyle weren't around to interfere. Victor gave no visible reaction, so she continued. Give me the right access, get Kyle and me into that party in France, and I'll make sure he's out of Claire's life by the time you return. Victor stared at her for a long moment, weighing her offer. She didn't flinch. Finally, he gave a small nod. Fine. Get on that list. Audra smiled. You won't regret it. She left shortly after, but her mind was already racing with possibilities. France. Dumas. Kyle. Claire. If she played it right, she could flip this entire situation to her advantage. Kyle still had feelings, real, messy feelings, for Claire, and she intended to weaponize every ounce of that vulnerability. If she could make Claire believe Kyle had betrayed her at the party, perhaps in a moment orchestrated to look like infidelity or deception, it would fulfill Victor's demand and remove Claire from Kyle's orbit entirely. Meanwhile, Amy lingered back at GCAC, sipping a martini, observing the unraveling threads around her. She didn't trust Audra, not fully, but she admired the woman's audacity. Still, something in her gut told her that this was all building to something larger. A reckoning. A collapse. And when it did, those who stood too close to Victor's fire would burn with it. Back at the ranch, Victor poured himself a drink, staring out into the sprawling horizon. He had always believed in control, mastery over every situation, every player, every outcome. But Kyle's persistence, Audra's ambition, Amy's growing presence, and the chaos that Aristotle Dumas had unleashed, it was all starting to splinter. And Victor Newman hated losing control. Little did he know, a reckoning was coming. One that not even he could see. And it would begin not in Genoa City, but in France, where the ghosts of the past, the lies of the present, and the ambitions of the future would all converge under one roof, with blood on the menu. Would you like me to continue with what happens at the Dumas party in France, including more twists with JT, Nick, Adam, Claire, and Sally? Or do you want to explore Lily's next moves and Amy's secret plans? Cole's cough echoed through the quiet gloom of the carriage house, rattling against the wooden rafters like a troubling warning. He stood near an empty stall, arms crossed protectively over his chest, breath catching in staccato bursts that trickled out in uneven, rasping gasps. Victoria and Claire watched him with mounting concern, each taking a step closer whenever another spasm seized his ribs. "I told you both I'm fine," he insisted, forcing a half-hearted smile. His voice cracked on the final word, and another violent cough tore through him. "It's just a little cold, nothing more." He leaned on the stall door for support, closing his eyes as if willing the pain to recede. But it only intensified, and Victoria, unable to remain calm any longer, exhaled sharply. "Cole, you're not fine," she snapped, worry spiking in her eyes. Claire's expression was taut with fear. She gripped her father's hand like a lifeline. "Papa, please," she began, her voice unsteady, but another cough cut her off. At that moment, a hush fell over the dusty rafters as the universal tension of emergencies settled in. Victoria drew her phone from her pocket and dialed swiftly, giving terse instructions before pocketing the device and turning back to Cole. "The doctor's on his way," she said, voice softening. Cole swallowed hard, nodding as if to convince them both, and himself, that he still believed the lie. But when he coughed again, wet and forceful, his face paling, Claire couldn't take it anymore. "Dad," she whispered, tears welling, "please sit down. Don't move." Cole shook his head, fighting dizziness. "No," he managed, voice hoarse. "I'm fine." But as he straightened, another fit of coughing bent him double, and he braced his forehead against the wooden partition, eyes squeezing shut. Claire rushed forward and cradled his side, as though she could hold him together if only her arms were strong enough. "Dad, please, let me help you," she urged, her words trembling. By the time Dr. Jennings arrived, a tall, stoic man whose white coat was already streaked with dust from the gravel driveway, Cole looked as though he'd aged 10 years in an hour. The doctor knelt beside him, draping a warm, reassuring hand over Cole's shoulder. "Let me hear you breathe," he said quietly, lifting his stethoscope. Victoria and Claire fell silent, pressing forward so they could see. The carriage house's dusty light filtered in through slatted windows, casting long shadows across the scene as though the barn itself held its breath. Cole exhaled shakily, and Dr. Jennings placed the stethoscope on his back, moving it in slow, deliberate sweeps. Victoria watched his face keenly, trying to read what his expression might betray. Claire's hand tightened around her father's fingers, her knuckles white. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, Dr. Jennings conceded, "I'm not liking what I'm hearing." His tone was measured but grave. "Cole, your lungs sound congested. It could be pneumonia. We need to get you to the hospital for chest x-rays and blood work." Victoria's heart pounded in her chest like a frightened animal's. "Pneumonia," she repeated, her voice barely more than a whisper. "He's been so strong. He doesn't act sick." Dr. Jennings glanced at her, empathy flickering in his eyes. "Pneumonia can sneak up quickly, especially when someone tries to ignore the warning signs. The sooner we move him, the better his chances." Cole managed a weak nod, shoulders slumping as if relief washed over him at having his illness finally acknowledged. But the relief quickly gave way to fear. "I don't want to scare Claire," he croaked, looking at his daughter. Tears brimmed in her eyes as she fastened her gaze on him. "Papa, it's okay," she choked, her voice thick with tears. "I love you. I want you to get better." She leaned in and kissed his forehead, her tears faltering like tiny pearls against his skin. Victoria took a calming breath before grabbing Cole's arm gently. "I'll go with him," she told Claire firmly. "You stay here and keep an eye on things. Make sure no one wanders into the barn and gets injured if he collapses." Claire hesitated, looking from her father to her mother as if torn between both impulses. "Just he'll be okay, Papa," she whispered, running a hand along his forearm. He offered her a small, reassuring smile, though it wavered with the effort. "I will. I promise." Within minutes, a small ambulance arrived, its siren a muted wail in the mid-afternoon stillness. Paramedics stepped into the barn, assessing Cole's condition with practiced efficiency. They lifted him gently onto a stretcher, securing him with straps, their voices professional but kind. Victoria climbed in beside him, her hand never leaving his. "You're going to be okay," she said, though her eyes shone with uncertainty. "Just hang in there." And as the ambulance doors closed with a soft thud, Cole offered one more reassuring nod to his daughter, his bright, brave Claire, before the vehicle's engine roared to life and whisked him away down the gravel path. In the silent aftermath, the dust settled again, and Claire touched the empty space her father had left. Her breath hitched with grief and worry. "Stay with Papa," she whispered to the silent stalls, as though pleading with the barn itself to protect him. Victoria emerged a moment later, her expression weary but determined. She knelt beside Claire, pulling her into a tight embrace. "He's in good hands, sweetheart. He's going to the best hospital in the city. He'll be fine." Claire's tears spilled over. "Promise me you'll let me know as soon as you hear anything." Victoria nodded, brushing a gentle fingertip across her daughter's cheek. "Of course, baby. I promise." Later that evening, in the sterile quiet of the hospital's radiology suite, Cole lay on the X-ray table, the crisp hospital gown open at the back. His breaths were shallow, each one a labor. The radiology tech adjusted the machine above him, ready to capture images of his lungs. Victoria stood off to one side, gripping his hand through the thin sheet. The machine hummed to life, and Cole squeezed his eyes shut as the cool were passed over his chest. Moments later, in the small, dimly lit consultation room, Dr. Jennings reappeared with a somber expression. Victoria and Claire, both ushered in by a kindly nurse, stood by the door, relief mingling with dread. "It is pneumonia," Dr. Jennings confirmed, sliding the X-rays onto the lightbox. "It's moderate in severity but caught soon enough that antibiotics and rest should see him through it. We'll keep him in for observation tonight and make sure he's responding." Claire exhaled in relief, clutching her mother's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. Victoria's eyes shone with gratitude as she bent to kiss her daughter's forehead. "Thank God," she whispered. "Thank you, Doctor." Dr. Jennings nodded kindly. "He's strong, but he needs rest. Make sure no one visits tonight except family. He'll be on 4 antibiotics and plenty of fluids. This hospital has an excellent infectious disease team. He should start improving within 24 hours."